dive stage at the GREENTECH Festival today, and just to introduce myself, my name is Christian Wölbert from CT Magazin, which is the largest IT and tech magazine in Europe, and I also write for Heise, which is the leading IT news site in Germany. And I have 4 exciting panelists on stage with me. I'm very delighted to introduce Majorie Hernandez, on the right side from my point of view. She's a futurist and entrepreneur fusing the worlds of blockchain, design and technology. She's trained in architecture and design, and she has co-founded ventures like the Dematerialised, market space for digital goods, and LUKSO, an Ethereum-based blockchain for the new creative economy. Thanks for joining us. And next to Majorie is Martin Wimmer. And since December 2021, Martin is CDO, Chief Digital Officer at the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And previously he was Chief Digital Officer at the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature and Safety. And in his role as CDO, he initiated the network digital.global, connecting BMZ and its partners, with the aim to bridge digital gaps between genders, countries and work regions.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And we have Max Orgeldinger. He's a board member at TLGG, an agency and consulting working in fields like charging, energy transition, XR and tokens. He's also a passionate NFT collector and part of the team that built Mercedes-Benz NXT, the official Mercedes-Benz NFT brand.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. And we have Bernhard Kronfellner. He has more than 15 years experience working for Boston Consulting Group and is a partner for digital assets and the metaverse. Besides BCG, Bernhard is a co-founder and angel investor in various Web3 companies and a lecturer at University of Technology in Vienna. Thank you.
Hello.
So today we're going to talk about sustainability in AI, VR, and the token economy. I think I don't have to stress how interesting and important this topic is. What I find noteworthy is that we've had several decades of digitization in the past already, and still carbon dioxide emissions are growing, so they're still moving into the wrong direction. I think this fact shows that we have still something to talk about and a lot to do. We decided to jump right in to the discussion, and I would like to ask the first question to Majorie. Majorie, could you just very briefly explain what LUKSO is, and also if you think technologies like this, like a digital marketplace like this, can help with decarbonization?
For sure, awesome. Yeah, so as you said, I co-founded LUKSO around 5 years ago. Kind of like we've been in the blockchain space for a very long time, 10 years at this point, and we were driven by the motivation and the belief that blockchain technology is going to power the next generation of applications that are potentially and primarily running on creative use cases, and kind of like being able to provide the pieces of technologies that creators need to enter kind of like the market in a decentralized manner. So we enter kind of like that space, and we publish a white paper called A Blueprint for a New Creative Economy in 2019. And since then, we're working primarily in open source technology, smart contracts, standards, and things like this. We launched on May 23rd of this year, finally, after 5 years of long work. And yeah, so if you guys want to check it out, it's LUKSO.network. Everything is there. It's online and open source. And I think we're driven, and I personally am also driven by the fact that we understand that it's very clear that the practices that capitalism or modern capital markets have brought to our planet, they are not sustainable in the long run, and that's very clear. And we believe that transparency is the only way forward. And technologies such as decentralized ledger technologies like LUKSO and others, will definitely support kind of like that move forward in terms of like demonstrating and applying those beliefs in the praxis. In my e-commerce and Dematerialised, we are very aware that the fact that something is digital doesn't mean that it won't pollute our environment no longer. So we are very conscious of that. So we introduce a digital standard in order to show transparency around our digital products, like how they were created, which pieces of technology were used to create those products, how many people were involved, where were those people sitting in which part of the planet while creating those products, and things like that. So for us at the Dematerialised, as a very different venture as it is LUKSO, because LUKSO, everything is open source, the Dematerialised is driven by users purchasing assets, right? So that's like our main goal at the end, is provide with exciting, beautiful products. We understand those products, they do need to make us happy and be awesome and fun, but they should also, subscribe to the beliefs of like, we're living in a society, they should evolve beyond plastic and things like that. So we introduce a lot of like transparency standards in order to demonstrate that, they're not impactless, but they're definitely way less impact. So we calculate like our digital assets are like against their physical counterpart, they always like emit 95% less emissions. So we are very proud of that, and we're really proud of like kind of like lead forward and demonstrating by showing our data and putting it in public in a decentralized ledger technology. So if we were to lie or have malicious intent, then it will be very clear that we just did that in public and in front of everybody. So that's what we do.
Thank you. So did I get you right that on the one hand, if I buy a digital asset, for example, jewelry or a dress, I can find out about the carbon footprint on your platform and compare it to the physical
Yes, so we don't necessarily talk too much about we do talk about the carbon footprint, and when we started the Dematerialised, we were trying to always offset whatever, we will calculate how much this collection took, and we will try to offset it. But we realize, okay, we have to find smarter strategies, because we cannot just plant a tree for every, like it's long term, how many trees we can plant. That's also not a good idea to do it that way. So we decided to just basically demonstrate with each product what is the impact, and not only from like an environmental perspective, but also from a human perspective, like how many people were involved. Where were those people working? Were they working under the right conditions, right? Because I think, in digital products, one of the things that we really wanted to prevent when we started working on the Dematerialised was like around virtual dressing and how people will wear these products. AR technology was not so crisp back then, was still still today, certain moments doesn't have the definition that a fashion consumer will wish for. And a lot of our competitors were deciding to basically have 3D artists address people manually on using a 3D software, and we realized we cannot do that because that will generate other issues, right? Like if I buy a $30 t-shirt that is 100% digital and a 3D artist have to sit there for 2 hours to dress me up, it's not gonna be sustainable, right? So we're gonna have the same issues that we have now with physical manufacturing, with digital manufacturing. So we definitely try to provide solutions that are definitely based on a technology of scale and prevent as much, like as less hand labor in like a traditional way as possible. So if I got you right, you also try to address the social dimension of sustainability, not just the ecological one. Yeah, because I think definitely this is not my area of expertise, but we do believe this stuff they're not mutually exclusive, right? And normally you enter in cycles that they affect each other. And I think, you can't, it would be very hypocritical for us to be very concerned about CO2 emissions, but be completely fine with people working in poor conditions, right? So I think it has to be a comprehensive kind of like approach in terms like sustainability also means that our peers, people just like us, but they are living in a different location, or they didn't have the opportunities to have, amazing education and things like this. It's not analog for allowing for practices to continue to take place. So I think for me, it's not necessarily an environmental issue or a human issue. It's just like, well, we are here, and we need to address all of these things at large. So that's why for the Dematerialized, for us it's really important to understand what are the conditions our 3D artists that we work with are under.
Thank you. Max, you also work with digital assets like NFTs. What do you think about, is there a potential to reduce emissions through this technology?
Yes, I think it's easy to get stuck in very technical discussions of, how does the blockchain work and different blockchains and that kind of stuff. And I think for the question that you asked, it's much more interesting to start with the use case. So what category can actually have what effect? And I think there's a bunch of ideas for the future, but the one that we are most excited in the short term is collectibles and art, really. And it's a major market in the physical world, right? There's billions and billions of dollars being spent on collectibles, and that has a very large physical footprint. So there's 50 billion Pokemon cards, for example, that are in circulation. That is all paper that had to been printed, shipped around the world. There's 1 million Rolexes produced every year, and personally, I don't think that the majority of them is being used in a utilitarian way. It's used for status expression and for collecting and such. And I think there's a way of replacing part of those physical collectibles and part of that physical art with digital art. And I think we are moving into a world where many of us spend more and more time online in front of screens. Those screens are evolving. We talked about AR, XR, all of that stuff. So I think the more time we spend online, the more potential there is for goods in the digital to also have value. And we see that in video games, where currently the majority of those are in NFTs. We see it in the art market, where NFTs have really opened a new kind of market. And I think just overall transitioning part of that huge physical market to a more digital market has the potential of reducing that physical footprint, CO2 footprint. Obviously, there's still energy, there's still server footprint and such, but I think the complexity of the footprint is much more reduced. So it's easier to power, for example, servers with renewable energies than figuring out the entire CO2 footprint of a complex supply chain that spans the entire world and working on all of those stages. And I think that, to me, is the first step, and then there's many different other use cases, but to me that's the one that has already proven itself over the last couple of years, and that we're very interested in the short term.
Okay, so also the idea of replacing physical goods with digital ones and saving emissions by that way.
Especially those goods that are emotional, that are for fun, for status, all that stuff. Like, we're not going to replace a rain jacket that is being used to not get wet, but we might replace goods that they mainly have an emotional value. And I think if you actually look into it, the majority of people collect something. It's stamps, it could be T-shirts worn by musicians, it could be little figurines, books. There's so much stuff that people collect, and it's sort of a century-old phenomena.
I think it's not unfair to say that this idea is a little bit, we're in crypto winter now, as it's being said, because last year a lot of people have collected NFTs, and I don't know if everybody is still holding these, or some people sold them already, but I guess a lot of people lost money. So Bernhard, what do you think? Is there another spring for collecting NFTs and for crypto?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So I see that the market is coming back, but with reasonable use cases. So we are now after the .com bubble, 20 years ago. Yeah, this is the crypto winter. It's like the .com bubble. What happened in the .com bubble was actually that a lot of .com companies, left the stage. Yeah, but the technology remained, as we know. And afterwards, like, we have all this big techs like Google, like Amazon, and so on, that emerged using this technology and changed the entire economy. Yeah, so there will be definitely another rally. Not in terms of speculation, more in terms of using the technology, be it NFTs, be it digital assets, be it blockchain, be it metaverse, to come up with use cases that are helping us, which is helping us as a society, which is kind of a new thing when you compare this then to, I don't know, the board A pipe that we had 1.5 years ago. So I definitely see good use cases coming up. Yeah. So.
Yeah, to stick with the chances a little bit longer before we get to the threats and the risks, I'd like to ask you, Bernhard, you also work about the metaverse and also about digital assets. So do you see more potential for slowing down climate change in VR, XR, the metaverse, or digital assets like NFTs?
So let me answer this with a little bet. Yeah.
Okay.
So my bet is sitting here 2023. My bet is that in 3 years this festival will be also offered in the metaverse. Yeah. As a separate representation where we can follow the panels and so on and so on. Yeah. So this is my bet with the festival. If I lose it, yeah, I come from Vienna to Berlin by bicycle.
Okay, but what do you
that's
mean
not
by
that bad. I mean, you're gonna do a nice bike ride from Vienna. I think it should be something more significant.
That would be quick, yeah. So I would kill my entire agenda for a week, I would say, yeah, for these 700 kilometers, and then come.
But what does it mean for climate change if you say this also in the metaverse? It will take place in a physical manner and also in the metaverse, but people will still travel here and take flights, or?
Yeah, that's actually the point. So when we use our metaverse glasses, VR, XR glasses, then we don't need to travel that much anymore. Yeah, we saw that what happened during COVID. First off, second, if you use tokens as well to pay people, yeah, they can basically sit wherever they want. So we are changing now from you need to live where you work. You can nowadays live wherever you want, meaning that you don't need to go that much on vacation because you're living on vacation anyway. There's so many people that are living, I don't know, in Bali and so on, and this is an effect, and they get paid by tokens normally. So this is an effect that we'll probably see more often in the future. And there's already a run from companies, and we as Boston Consulting got often asked, okay, how can we get the best talents from innovative companies? And our answer is very often, well, offer them something that they really like. And this is could be have a token program, meaning that they pay the salary in token. They can be wherever they want. By doing that, you have well, the tax system is not that complicated anymore, and you give them the freedom to be where they are. Yeah? So the question is now how to get. Yeah, please.
Does BCG have a token program?
We have an office in the metaverse in Decentraland. We have 2 offices in VR platforms, so in Glue and in Arthur. That's where we meet as well. And we also, like even 2 years ago, I had the first metaverse event where I invited 35 banks. Normally we invite them, I don't know, come to London, we pay everything, yeah, including flights, including hotel. Now we met 2 hours in the metaverse. It was even 2 years ago. Everyone was happy. We had a very good event, and it costed a fraction of the normal price. Yeah? And in terms of climate, no one flew around.
But is this really? I mean, I personally don't like flying, and I like the idea that we save flights through the metaverse. But is this effect really proven? For example, of course, we've had a reduction in the number of flights, a huge reduction. Because of the pandemic, but flights are returning to 2019 levels now. And also there is one thesis by the author Mike Berners-Lee who says that video conferences or the metaverse that might lead to new relationships or intense relationships that lead to more flights. Martin? Sorry.
Digitalization is already responsible for more CO2 emissions than air traffic. So air traffic isn't the problem anymore. The problem is digitalization. The chimneys of the Silicon Valley are stinking and smoking just like the ones in Gelsenkirchen or Manchester did. So this is the problem we have to tackle. And there are 2 major problems that we are facing. One is that 1/3 of the world population isn't even online by now. So with 6 of 10 fastest growing economies being in Africa, you can imagine what that means, because I could do a similar bet that many of those 3 billion people will be online in 3 years with all the CO2 emissions that causes, with all the devices that have to be produced, that with all the data centers that have to be running then. And the second reason, of course, is innovation and technology. And the internet is not sending emails anymore. It is AR, VR, streaming, and so on now. And this requires way more data capacity than before. And it requires new machines, new devices. Everything has to be produced. Everything will be thrown away 2 years after that because of the new innovation cycle. And that is why digitalization is, yes, there are positive aspects, but no, it will not be solution. It will not be the solution to everything.
But we need less offices as well.
And I don't think anyone claims it's a solution to everything. I think the interesting question is, if we agree, and that's a whole another discussion, that we need economic growth, especially in the regions that you just mentioned, what is the least CO2 intensive way of getting that economic growth? So I think whenever we have economic growth in regions that start from a much lower basis, that's going to lead to emissions of some sort. But I think if we continue with the model that we had in the past, that is very intense in physical consumption, I think it's very clear what we'll end up with. Obviously, a digital economy also has a footprint. The question is, can we get to one that, through a mixture of renewable energy, recycling, also optimizing on the software side and so on, in the end has a much better ratio of economic output and prosperity for people, jobs, to the actual physical footprint?
That's possible, but not a given, because the digital industries are doing the same harm to nature and the world, and in the social, when you look at the social side of things, you just mentioned it, than the brick and mortar companies did. If you look at all the fabrics, in Asia, where all our devices are produced now, they are the sweatshops of the Western world. Look at ChatGPT. Most of you will have read this article about how Microsoft or OpenAI produced ChatGPT in Kenya. We always have in mind it's technology, it's working somewhere in the internet, but that's not the truth. Hundreds or even thousands of people in Kenya are working on this software, and they are digging to the dirt of the internet for us under brutal working conditions. And whenever you ask a question to ChatGPT, someone in Kenya suffers from that. That's the truth today.
So we have a very pessimistic view and a more optimistic
it's not
view.
Pessimistic. I'm just telling the truth.
Yeah, I would like to ask you, Martin, do you have an example where you know or where you can prove that the negative aspects outweigh the positive ones?
We're working on that. And it's easier for a government, of course, because we don't have to make money with it. We spend money on it. Actually, we are spending hundreds of millions of euros on digital transformation projects around the world in the global south. However you count it, 800 million euro. And everything we do follows principles, digital principles that look at the working conditions in the gig economy, have environmental issues they consider them, and so on. So we follow clear principles, but we don't have to money with it. Everyone else that is trying to make money with it, and that's the big five in the USA. Then we have a few players in China and Asia. they don't care about working conditions and data protection.
Bernhard, I wanted to give you the chance to answer to this flight and metaverse topic that we mentioned. Do you actually know that it is more environmentally friendly, or is it just a guess to use the metaverse instead of doing it the old traditional way and accounting for those systemic effects and rebound effects, so people might do more video conferences than they used to because it's convenient and it's cheap, or systemic effects like people don't go on business travel but they fly to Bali for a week of holiday or something? Are you sure that there are these positive effects that you mentioned, or is it just a thesis?
Yeah. So we did our analysis as well, and happy to compare then afterwards. So we did an analysis in the Web3 space. In the Web3 space, that's where I'm working at. We have a couple of companies that don't even have an office. So they have a physical office, in one of those places, and nobody is going there. So everybody is working at home, which means they save the space for the office, they save the electricity for another office, because everyone is working at home, but they live already, right? So you don't have an office which needs electricity, which needs a space, which needs someone to go there, to commute there, flying or by car or by whatever. Yeah. So you save basically a second room per people. Yeah. Nevertheless, of course, these companies that don't have an office, and these are even big, they're in the thousands of people, and they don't have an office in the Web3 space. So nevertheless, and this is like a downside, of course they meet. They meet at conferences, or they go on vacation together. Yeah. So basically, it's like an inverse world that people are working where they live, and they don't go anywhere. They only go on vacation, not with the family, but then with the company. So it's kind of inverse world to what we see right now. Yeah. So, and again, when we compare this, that those companies don't have an office, in terms of carbon footprint, they're actually in this little ecosystem that we checked and did an analysis for. It was much better, because less flying, less going to the office, no office at all, and in total the amount that you need for the devices, well, most of them they have it anyway. Yeah, like everyone has one iPhone and they're kind of happy they only have one and not 10. Yeah, from each company, and the additional devices that they need compared again to the office, to the flying and so on was by far lower in our analysis that we did.
Martin?
From my point of view, this is an allied discussion, because most of the people in the world do not work in fancy office spaces in Kreuzberg. They work on the street, and they are policemen, they work in a bakery, they work in the industry, if they have work at all. And so the effects that you described, I think, are correct, but they apply to only a few people in the world.
Yes.
Martin, because you do a lot of projects around the world, and I would... Martin, yeah. Because you do a lot of projects in the world, I would ask you, do you also see positive effects of technology?
Sure, we use, as I said, 800 million euro we spend on digital projects because we support everything that helps us to reach the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. There's one, just one example is our Fair Forward project. You can find everything on our website. You just mentioned the network that we founded. Actually, it was not me, it was my minister, of course, who founded it. You'll find it in bmz-digital.global. You'll find us on LinkedIn, in the web, Twitter, everywhere. And one of the projects you'll find there is Fair Forward, where we help countries like Peru, and I think Indonesia, to use satellite data to identify areas in rural areas of forests where they have to act or where they shouldn't act. So protect the rainforest, things like that. That's a typical AI-driven project to help save the world and not help save, make someone richer.
Okay. Does anyone want to answer directly?
Well, I actually really appreciate everything you're saying because I'm a diehard optimist. So I always think everything is going to be fine at the end, somehow. But I really appreciate hearing your vantage point, you know, and I do live in Germany, but I grew up in Venezuela, and I do have a very clear and a first-hand experience of like the immense inequalities that exist right now in the world, right? So when you are talking about how cool our lives are with our Zoom meetings, like we have Zoom meetings when we want, and we also travel when we want. Right, and I think most of these decisions are not being driven by these companies that are trying to be more environmentally friendly, because if there's a group of people that travel like maniacs, it's the Web3 community. It's like one global tour, like collective all over the world. So I think the decisions are being made by coming from a place of extreme privilege, of like, I can afford not to go to the office because my house is comfortable enough to work from home. And I think, you know, and also from the user perspective, you know, like you, Max, and I, you know, we were talking about how, you know, the rise of digital assets and how it will substitute physical products. But at the end, the motivation is, what do I like more, right? Nobody's going to buy a digital asset because they are concerned about, oh, my physical product is too intensive for our environment. They just primarily are like, I hang out more online and I want digital products. And that's the motivation. So I think the point I guess I'm trying to make is that it comes down to how we create incentives. Because most of us and most people make decisions based of what pleases them, right? It's very difficult to make a small decision that is thinking about global impact every time you pick up a straw for the last 50 years, you know, and now straws are gone, thankfully. But, you know, this was not a thought that every human had when they pick up a straw. They were causing this massive problem. So I guess how we create incentives to create systems, they are still fun, that people enjoy, that, you know, it's not about now paying some penitence because we have damaged the world at this point, but creating incentives that are capital effective. You know, not everybody's going to build altruistic companies and to fix the planet, but we need to create incentives in order to still, while creating capital and creating jobs and doing all of this stuff, we are not unaware of the realities that you very well are addressed, because we live in this place of extreme comfort and we forget the most and not people in this world really, I mean, I grew up seeing it, right? If I will go to certain parts of my city, like people will ask me, and I was not there for the first 18 years of my life, people will ask me where I'm from. And, you know, they couldn't believe we were from the same city, right? And this is not happening in some really distant place, like Venezuela is part of the Western world, you know, and like in Latin America, and these people living primarily in these conditions is the parts of the globe that have the most amount of the population is younger, right? So it's actually more the future than it is in other places.
But you know, it will be so much easier in the augmented reality when you finally can choose an avatar with a white skin.
But you know, it's really interesting because every time I use my pictures to generate AI portraits,
because irony, of course.
I know, I get heavily whitewashed. Like the results are like, oh, so that's how I would look like if I age like a white person. So of course, that's so true.
Maybe my last question before we ask the audience, to all of you, the ones of you who want to answer. If I got you right, we need to focus on basic digital needs instead of luxury goods. I don't know if we can agree on this.
No.
Okay.
I think that's totally wrong. I think digital products are already a big luxury. Because if you are able to afford a digital product, means you have access to the internet, you have a computer or a mobile device, and you have disposable income.
That's what I mean, but how can we provide basic digital services to people, and how could we focus on this?
What I think it's a very different question. I think, you know, we have a huge economy that consists of all kinds of different parts, and only in their combination will they provide the solutions. I think no single technology or no single discussion can provide all of the answers. I think if we're gonna get to net zero, we need to transform all parts of the economy, and I think we need to transform them. We can't just shut the majority of them down. So I think it's worthwhile looking into every individual part of the value chain, every single industry. It's worth looking into the high-end luxury part, and it's worthwhile looking into the basic goods. And obviously, 30 minutes of discussion can't cover all of that. I think there is a role to be played also in the high-end market, because actually that's one of the markets that creates a significant amount of current CO2 impact, but is also one that at least indirectly has a strong economic role to play. And were it to disappear tomorrow, I think it would have dangerous effects also on society and its stability. So I think also working in that field combined with other efforts is worthwhile as well, which doesn't mean that all the other discussions aren't also important to be had.
Bernhard, a short statement.
Yeah, a short one. So we are currently into transition from the Web 3 to the Web 2. So what I mean is that Web 3 technology, which is only used from elites right now, you're right, is basically, and all these new use cases that we see are there in order to tackle the Web 2 crowd. Meaning all these Instagram guys and all these Facebook guys and so on, and which is like existing almost everywhere, despite this, 20% or 1/3 that don't have internet access yet. But basically to use those new technologies for everyone who has internet access without knowing. Yeah, so basically we will use those technologies in a super easy way, because nowadays you need a wallet, you need some knowledge of digital assets and so on to use those technology. In the future, everyone will be able to use it, because it will be as easy as using Instagram and Facebook.
So Web3 for everyone. Martin, do you agree?
Where do we come from? We come from the idea of a free internet and a world wide web. Where do we go to? One metaverse owned by one company that has the meta in the name? No, probably not. Some metaverses, how many? 5? That's where we are right now with the internet. 5 big companies plus surrounding. So, of course, from a governance perspective, we have to make sure that there is way more open source, open data, open access, everything was open. We have to include everybody, all the citizens in our country. By the way, 20% of German seniors, age 60 or older, have never been to the internet. They have never been to the internet. So digitalization is really a big social issue. And I talked about the digital divide, digital gap between the West and the South already.
Okay. Marjorie, would you like to add a very, very short final statement before we ask the audience?
100%. I mean, I think I totally agree with you in terms of, like, obviously Web3 is going to become easier and simpler to use, but actually the places in the world where Web3 technology makes the most sense is second and third world countries, right? Places where the institutions are corrupt, where the banks disappear. I saw it in my childhood several times. We wake up and the banks were not there. Where institutions have an issue where you cannot control, like where inflation is a massive problem. So actually those pieces of technology make more sense there. Like this society here in Germany, like people have extreme trust in their institutions because the last time they failed was a while back. And I think that's the part what I think we need to focus is not only, like you said rightfully, like it's not only about creating applications to kind of satisfy the luxury desires of, like, I want to look really cool with this digital sneaker, but which is totally fine because I do. But like also making sure that we don't forget that this technology primarily it comes to make things that used to be scarce to make them abundant. So, and that should be the initial kind of like, and the true purpose of it. And I think that's what we should keep track on.
Thank you. So I would like to invite the audience to ask questions. Please feel free. Ask everyone on the stage. Is there a question? Please.
I'm always wondering, like, I like the idea of an open internet, and I like the idea of the old, like it has been before, like 20 years ago. But on the other hand, I'm always kind of asking myself, how would, like, if the German government, how would you do it? Because right now, it's already, like, everything is running on Amazon servers. Everything is already in the hands of 3, 4, 5 big companies, and actually, I don't see like the German government like really pushing it for Germany and for the world.
That's such a good point, because actually even Ethereum, most of the Ethereum nodes are running on Amazon servers. So if Amazon, so decentralized, so it's like kind of like a oxymoron in that sense. So totally agree.
I agree too. Fortunately, at least now, the German government and the EU level and also the UN and everybody, all the multilateral stages, they are working on regulations now. And on the EU level, you have the AI Act, Chip Act, DSA, DMA, and so on. We are too late, but still we do.
And I think regulation is a very important part of it. I think historically there was a danger that regulation actually helped the incumbents, because it's so tough for the newcomers to actually comply with all the regulation. It's actually been a huge favor to those 5 big companies, because the regulation is so complex that only the companies that have thousands of employees and lawyers and all that can comply with them. So I think also leaving room for grassroots efforts for decentralization, and there's decentralization movements and discussions on all parts of the stack, from the hardware level to the software level, and probably need hours to discuss all of those. But I think like getting that balance right and actually helping the little guys and being tougher on the large companies, it should be a focus in terms of regulation.
Quick one. So yes, there is definitely a need for this, and I interpret the blockchain movement and the various blockchains, maybe beside Ethereum, that is exactly going into this direction. And this is basically underlying that there is a need, and there is also kind of an offer, a counter offer to this owned internet that we know. Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to thank you. Very interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And maybe if you stick around, maybe there's a chance to meet us afterwards. And yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.